Hi y'all, it is I, Kim from the Beautiful Scar Project, and today is hashtag Tablespoon Tuesday, so I am really excited to kind of get into what was on the blog this week and talk about our theme, which was showing up and why it's important to show up. So this blog post was meant not for necessarily the grief warrior, but it was for their people. It's for the grief warriors people. So one of the things, I alluded to last week with my blog post was that I've kind of become the grief girl. I've kind of become the person that you reach out to if someone's lost a baby, someone has lost their spouse, someone has lost someone that's of great importance to them, that they're struggling or what have you, and they just don't know what to say. It's the number one thing I hear. I don't know what to say, and I don't want to make it worse. And making it worse is our biggest fear, right? When you don't know what to say, you open your mouth and all the platitudes come out, right? And you know you don't want to say those things. You know you want to make it meaningful and kind and tender, but you don't know what to say. And that provides fear, that provides insecurity, and it makes you kind of not want to reach out, which I get. I understand that it can feel very overwhelming to try to figure out what to say when you don't know what to say. So one of the things that I hear is, well, I don't want to make it worse. So should I even mention them? Should I even mention the person who died? So that's a myth I want to dispel, is that by mentioning their person that died, it's going to make it worse. So I didn't forget, right? So I've lost 4 babies. I have Jackson, I have Grace, I have Reagan, I have Caleb. I didn't forget that my babies died. I didn't forget. So anytime someone mentions one of my babies, it's usually met with, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to make it worse. I don't want to upset you, kind of a thing. And for me, I love hearing my babies' names because it's been a long time, right? I'm 10 years out from losing Jackson, and I'm 8 years out from losing Caleb, and Grace and Reagan were in between. So I don't hear their names a lot. So when I do hear their names, it's like salve to my soul. It's like a balm for my soul. So first of all, I want to dispel that myth. They didn't forget. So you mentioning that person's name isn't gonna make things worse. So that's number one. But I'm super passionate about grief warriors having their people show up, and here's why. I've had people in my life show up so well for me and take such great care of me through the loss of my children. And I've also had people not do that. I've had them not do that. So when we lost our first 3 babies, we lost them to early term miscarriage, and people have a tendency to dismiss that a little bit, kind of make it seem like it's not quite as big of a deal, because to them, the baby's an idea, right? It's not tangible to them. So when Caleb died at full term, Caleb was very tangible to people, simply because a lot of them came to the hospital. They held him, they met him, they read him stories, they sang him songs. We made a lot of memories in those 4 days in the hospital, and so he was very tangible to people. Whereas with our early term miscarriages, they were less tangible. So we didn't receive the support I wish we would have with our first 3 babies. The support we received after we lost Caleb was phenomenal. And I want to say this, my people who showed up in big ways, but they didn't know. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to do. They just knew they needed to be there. And it was awkward because they didn't know what to say. And they were so scared of making a mistake. They were so scared of breaking my heart more. And so we're going to get into next week the tangible ways that you can show up for people. And they showed up in great ways. However, there were also people who I counted on, who were my second or third phone call after I found out Caleb died, that didn't show up. They didn't show up physically, they didn't show up emotionally, mentally, nothing. And when you're in the thick of it, especially when you're in that raw grief, you're in that first year, even second year, when your people don't show up, it is devastating because it's another loss. That relationship is forever fragmented because there's this line in the sand. There's a line in the sand of who you were before your baby died and who you are after. You're never the same. And so part of that line of delineation for me was I couldn't continue on having a relationship with people who couldn't show up. And part of that was, they live out of state, which is fine. I understand not everybody can hop on a plane, but it's, here, I'm going to send you a check because I think you probably just need the money more than you need me. No, I needed you. It was phone calls months later. Not one mention of Caleb, not one mention of even how are you? It was very scripted, very, how's the family? How's this person? How's your mom? How's your dad? How's work? How's Colorado? What's the weather like there? I mean, it was very narrow parameters of what we talked about. And I can count on one hand how many conversations we had in that first year. And I'm not talking about somebody I'd been friends with for 6 months, a year, 5 years. I'm talking about people who I had multiple decades long relationships with. And they just weren't able to show up for me, especially mentally or emotionally. And after a while, I just couldn't continue a relationship with that person because the person I was then is not the person I am now. And so I had to leave that relationship in the then space, and it didn't get to continue into the now space. And I know that's people's biggest fear, right? Like they don't want to lose their friend. They don't want to do something to make them be cut off or what have you. But I will say that the people who showed up, man, they killed it, even when they were struggling, even though sometimes they totally biffed it. Sometimes they would say totally the wrong thing that would completely break my heart, but they tried. In my anger, in my raw grief, I wasn't able to see that. But on this side of things, further out, I'm able to see, even when they're face planting, even when they're just, not doing or saying the things that I needed them to do or say, they were still trying and they were still showing up. So that's why I'm so passionate about people's people showing up for them, because my friend Mandy always talks about the fact that everyone will have a day and it's going to look different. Everybody's day is different, but everybody has a day where who they were before and who they are now is totally different. And usually that's a tragedy. Usually that is trauma. Usually that is something really, really challenging. And in those moments, you need your people. You need your people to show up. So that's just a little bit about why I'm so passionate about people's people showing up, about why you should show up for your people. And next week, come on back, because we're going to talk about the tangible ways to do that. We're going to talk about how you can show up for your people, even when you're unsure, even when you're scared to make a mistake, even when you just literally are bumfuzzled and can't figure out one thing to come out of your mouth. It's cool. I got you. So come on back next week. Grief Warriors, bring your people, bring your tribe, bring your squad, because we want people to be able to show up really well for their grieving people. So have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.